thank you all so much. And the reason we're doing this is to really capture the story of Jim Dwyer and the influence he had on the industry and on so many of the people in it, all of us. Obviously, his family was key in all of that. And so, would you all sort of give a little bit of background about Jim, how Jim got going, and when you all entered the picture?
Yeah, well, I guess we'll start by, Dad was born here in the U.S. He was born in Sunnyside, Queens, and that's where he grew up. Both his parents immigrated from Ireland. They met here in the U.S., but they both were Irish immigrants, and that really, I think, formed a lot of Dad's personality. His mother, my grandmother, leaned over to me once when he was telling a story at dinner and said, "Your father's more Irish than I am." And he, it's just he really loved that, and that immigrant and kind of the attitude of working hard and doing everything he could to get ahead was really ingrained in him right from the start.
He would say he was a punk from Queens, right, from Sunnyside. Interesting, very hard childhood. I won't get into all of that.
Yeah.
I had two sisters. They had a very hard childhood, and I think that's part of what turned him into who he was. You can either go one of two ways, and his was, I'm going to go and I'm going to win.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that he had this passion that never died. It lived on even since with us, but he was an amazing guy who set out to change the world, and I think he helped do that.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, and Pat, when did you first encounter Jim?
Well, that'll be back in probably about 1992 when I joined CTIA. And Jim was was a founder for CTIA, and he in 1990 was I think that was a formation, and I came in 92, and when we both were on the board. He had this Irish background, I had the Irish background, and that worked well. So
Yeah.
I had a chance to get to know him really well, and he just, when Jim would walk into a room, and he'd give you that big smile and just light the place up.
Oh, yeah.
And, so he, fabulous individual. He has this strong ethical sense about him. He always put the customer first, and he always put himself in the customer's place. So as far as business went, he was a good person to emulate. And we shared like values to the point where he actually joined our board of directors. So he came in and let's say it was 2002 and served until he passed away. That's how I met him. And we shared a lot of things, including I had a chance to go over to Ireland and stay in his home for a couple of times. And one of the things that Jim told me, I was asking about, he had been chairman of the board for CTIA, and I was looking forward to becoming chairman of the board. And I said, "Jim, tell me about the year that you were chairman of the board. How was that year?" And he looks at me and gives me that smile, and he said, "That was the greatest year of my life." And I just thought, wow, that was the greatest year of his life. And he just gave you that infinite, that smile just doesn't end.
Like they have.
Because you could see he was thinking about it. He was thinking about that year, and he said, "No, that was the greatest year of my life."
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
We were very close. And I had a chance to be with him just before he passed away.
Pat, you mentioned him putting himself in the shoes of the customer. It was funny because my mom used to hate it. He'd walk into anywhere, a 7-Eleven. It didn't matter where he went. He'd be in there for 45 minutes to grab nothing because he would talk to everybody he knew, whenever was his friend. And it was so sincere how much he loved people, which is a skill it was part of him, but it's something I really thought was amazing, and I wish I was better at it. I mean, I do love people and I care, but he's so good at connecting.
Yeah, and that's one thing that he was so genuine about it, that after he passed away, I'm literally, as recently as a month ago, I meet people who say to me, "Your dad was my best friend." I've met hundreds of Dad's best friends. But that's because when he was with you, he was fully engaged with you. He did that with the customers as well. But when he had you and you had him, it was all that mattered. And he really gave you his attention and frankly his love. He was just a great loving guy. So.
Well, I knew your dad through CTIA and a little bit through the law firm before that. But I think not only with his customers, but with his competitors and his colleagues. And you talk about the founding of CTIA. It was actually, I think, in the 80s, but it was the telephone companies and the non-wirelines didn't have a place to come together for standards and stuff like that. And a lot of the non-wireline guys, the old RCCs, didn't want to play with the telephone company guys and the telephone company guys. And Jim was a founder of CTIA and instrumental in, convincing all those guys, like, hey, let us come reason together. And it just went through the industry from there. So, through CTIA, certainly. He really helped make that a much more collegial group, I think.
It was uniquely built to do that.
Yeah. So.
He was also, as he argued at the FCC for competitive cellular. So
yes.
Right from the beginning, before anyone knew what cellular was, back in the 70s, the FCC was going to grant the license to AT&T before the breakup. And he filed a brief and argued it at the FCC that there should be competition. You shouldn't give a monopoly to a monopoly.
Right.
And he at the time was a RCC, a radio common carrier. So they adopted that argument. It led to I don't know that he wanted 7 competitors, which it eventually grew to, but he wanted to at least have a shot. And then, as you probably know, they adopted that argument. There was competition, and by the time that it was licensed, it was the breakup had happened, and AT&T essentially, that was one of the assets that went to the baby bells was the wireless. And because of when and how he came into the industry, he ended up with a bunch of wireline licenses.
Yeah.
So he was the independent, arguing that the independent should have a chance, and by the time they licensed it, he was on the phone company side.
I know, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it was always funny listening to him tell the story, because he always boiled things down to simple things.
Yeah.
And he said, we're sitting there with the FCC, and they're arguing that they're saying you can't afford to do this.
Right.
He says, well, great. If I can't afford it, I go away. I fail. I go away, and you get what you want anyway. And that was just his style. Argument won, and here we are today.
Well, and of course, the 25th anniversary of cellular back in 2008, and of course your dad was there, and that was so terrific. But I think people forget he built from scratch and launched the first non-experimental system, and in record time, because Baltimore and Chicago had already been up since like 78, 79, tweaking things, and he got that Indianapolis license, and it was up in February of '84, just a couple of months after Washington, Baltimore.
Yeah, part of the reason why he was able to do that so quick, is that back in those days there were no auctions for spectrum. It was comparative hearings, and so the qualified bidders would have to go in front of the FCC, and they'd have to have a hearing, and then the FCC would decide who got the license. So he picked Indianapolis because there were only 2 other competitors who had qualified, and he went to each of them and said, let's partner and let's be first out of the gate, and that's what led to Indianapolis Telephone Company.
Yep. Which was, quite an achievement.
Yes,
so,
indeed.
Yeah.
And Ameritech had the other systems that went first, and I ended up working there. So
Right. We're a small world, right? Small world. So,
kind of the enemy, but
Jim was also the head of the legislative committee at CTIA for a number of years before he became chairman. And you talked about when he went to the FCC to argue for the original formation of the licensing scheme for cellular. The Telecom Act of '96 was passed shortly after Jim's term, but Jim was really lobbying, and Pat, you probably remember those CTIA days of pushing for reforms, and that was the first major reform since 1939.
Yeah.
And Jim was really instrumental in that also. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
and those were like crazy days for CTIA, I know. So
the beginning was so fun, though, wasn't it?
yeah,
It was Wild Wild West.
It was the Wild Wild West.
it was.
It's so interesting because there were so many people that didn't believe in cellular.
Yeah.
I got criticized for getting into it. They said, that's not going anyplace. That's already been tried and it doesn't work.
Right.
So we kept hearing that. And of course, Jim was an advocate all the way in. And actually, in my mind, made it happen in the format it happened.
Yeah.
So that alone, just allowed him to be into the Wireless Hall of Fame. But he did so much more than just that. He was a true negotiator, and he worked so that he made everybody happy, which is really unusual. And it's a credit to him and his style of, let's get this done. It was all
Right.
about, let's get it done. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
good enough to talk about it. Okay, let's get it done.
Yeah. I remember he would tell the story about negotiating, trying to settle markets, and then say, okay, get the lawyers out of the room.
Yeah, right.
Because he's like, let's get it done. And that was, and you all were so great at serving markets that originally the big analysts and carriers thought would not be good, strong markets. And they turned out to be probably more productive and valuable than some of the big markets.
Yeah.
It's interesting because some of the larger carriers actually sold some of their property because they thought, well, we've looked at it and we did the analysis and it can't make money.
Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody else wants these, let's sell it to you.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of them, of course, buy them back at a much higher price.
Right.
So it's interesting that you have these giant companies that kind of look at, it's not gonna work, and you got Jim, who's running full steam because he knows this is a gold mine. We got to grab it while we can.
Yeah, I think back on how it must have went when these guys would walk in the room like my dad and try to raise money. We're gonna put millions in the ground. We're gonna get 2,000 subscribers. Because remember that's what forecasts
how
were
it
like.
started. Yeah.
But they did it. It was gutsy. When you talk about entrepreneurs, those guys were entrepreneurs. They were gutsy. The day is long.
Well, and he never stopped being an entrepreneur, obviously.
Right,
I mean,
truly.
he really is one of the main reasons that Cybernet succeeded at CTIA because it had been wholly owned by CTIA and the board wanted to spin it off. And the bank, we got really close to a bank loan and they were like, nah, no, we don't think so. And your dad said, I'm in. I will back this.
Yeah.
And he did. And then CTIA turned around and bought it back and then sold it. So it was just amazing that way. And then he went on and started Interop with you all.
Yep.
And what was that sort of like? Working for your dad.
Well, interesting because I told you I was at Ameritech.
Yeah.
When I came out of college, I lived in Chicago. He was down in Florida, so I went and worked for Ameritech, and I really loved it. It was a really kind of cool place. My dad, Jim, was working with him, kind of his right hand down there, and my dad came to visit my wife and me, and took us to dinner, which was strange, right? Like it was like a business meeting with my father.
Yeah.
And he said to me, John, I'm going to do this one more time. If you ever want to work with me, it's now. And so my wife and I went home. We said, we got to go do this. And so I went. I told her 3 to 5 years in Florida. It's down 25.
Yeah.
I won.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
She's not happy necessarily, but anyway. So I went and I got to work and see it in action, how it really worked, and it was really cool. And I learned a lot from him in the 2 years that I got to be with you guys, building that up. And then we sold to AT&T in June of 2000. And in Dad's style, he hit the perfect sweet spot in the market. And then things didn't, he was just, it was brilliance. So then we were rooting around. I was looking at other technologies and things to do. And when we sold, we excluded an asset, which is an SMS platform that we had built ourselves. Of course, AT&T in the market ran on it for a year perfectly, no issues.
Yeah.
Anyway, I always say this man down here, Pat Riordan, is why Interop is here.
All right.
So, he was in friends, meeting with my dad, and I get a call one day. I'm working on something else. I get a call. He's like, John, get up here. Okay? Pat here in the room. And he's like, Pat said, the ecosystem was such that there was like one provider of SMS services and it was a fortune. Well, you either bought a platform for $1 million or there was this one hosted provider who was terrible.
Yeah.
And so Pat was like, there's no real good options. And so he said, John, can we do this? And Pat said, prove it. You said prove it. He said, we got a great one. He said, prove it.
It's very Irish. That's a very Irish thing.
Sure enough, my brother-in-law, who's the partner who's helped start this, Steve Zitnick, brilliant man. So we got together and we got with his team, Marvin Iwinski, great people, and we ended up selling our first platform to Pat. And then it was an interesting thing because, and this is the story, this is why you love your customer. No, there's two things. We built our own technology.
Yeah.
The other provider that was doing managed service was selling someone else's. Right? You can't you can't provide amazing service if you're selling someone else's stuff. So we built our own. We loved our customer. We treated him right. We did all that. I won't get into the name, but the president of that company, right? We got Pat, then we got Bluegrass Cellular. Remember Bluegrass? Lovely friends there. I get a call, it's like Christmas Eve, and they say, we need to talk to you. Our president. I'm like, okay. So he came and saw me, and we had a meeting, whatever, talking about we should work together. A couple days later, I got a call from a banker or something saying, you should buy them. I said, buy them? I said, maybe, but I wouldn't pay much. And they said, why?
Yeah.
I said, because I want to have all their customers in 18 months. And we did. And the reason was, my dad taught me, create the best technology there is. Be the best, and then love your customer and love your employees. You will win.
Yep.
It was clear as day they had none of those three things. And so that's how Interop started. But it was really seeing him in action and you and the way the team was. It was really an incredible experience, and we've enjoyed it ever since. He was my chairman. He lent me the money, so he got to the boss me around.
I don't believe that, but yes.
He was good. He was interesting in his whole philosophy. He's not a micromanager in any way, shape, or form. He's a visionary. He saw around corners, and he'd say, we need to go there. And then he'd go off to do something else, and he'd say, I put you in this spot, get me there. And then he'd check in, and he'd bump us back in line and everything. But it was really interesting. Inspired us to all figure out our way to go win.
Well, you talked about being not only in touch with the customers and friends with customers, but employees. And I'm remembering that at one point, the Irish story again, Dwyer Spar.
Yeah.
And that was, I'm sure, fun. And then when it wasn't fun, it went, it's like it's time to do something else. But would you talk a little bit about how that opened? And I'm thinking of that because we, all industry people, came down in droves over like 2 nights. Jim had to break it into 2 parties because there were so many people. That happened.
It was an incredible endeavor. Like all people, when they're successful, really successful, they dream about doing. He wanted to bring some taste of Ireland to Fort Myers, Florida.
Yeah.
So he built this massive, gorgeous pub, but it was like a 12,000 square foot pub. Which would work in a big city, but Fort Myers.
Yeah.
And we opened it, and that place, it was wild. He had found these 4 sisters in New York City.
The Screaming Orphans.
Screaming Orphans.
I remember that.
Yeah, he found them. They were just standing like in a window in a bar in New York. No one looking at him. No one cared. And he heard them. And I think my brother Chris was with him. And they went over to talk to him and said, "You're amazing." And we started flying them down. And they played for the opening. And they'd come at least once a month. They were there all the time.
Yeah.
It was great. Dad brought Ireland to Fort Myers.
Yeah.
But then it became the reality that these people, in real business, in our wireless business, you respect your employees, they respect you, and all the team. In the restaurant business, at least his experience was quite different. He said everyone's your partner because they're all taking money. And
that's tough.
And then he got sick, and he said, "Well, I'm not going to say."
I will say another fun thing about that pub, though. It's very much like what I was saying earlier. I still to this day will meet somebody and they'll say, Dwyer, were you part of the pub? I said, well, that was in our family. And I've so many people met there, got married there, celebrate every anniversary there because that was their special place. So it's funny how that just kind of ties through. It became a fun place. But he did everything right. I mean, in terms of that, treat the employees right, provide a great experience, and again, it was a tough business. The bar business is not an easy business, but he did the best he could with it.
Well, as I said, he was just so beloved and admired that, I had already moved to Texas by that point, but went to Florida for the opening, and so many of the old industry guys from the beginning, the pioneers were there. Pat was there. I don't think Denny came down. John Stanton was there. It was just like, oh my goodness, like an industry gathering. It was really terrific.
It's funny. He was another side of him that you wouldn't know, but he's extremely humble. Being his son, I had no idea really. Well, then I went down to work for him. I got to start seeing it, and then I was at the 25th anniversary with him. And it was like he was the Pope, and I didn't expect anything like that. I did not understand what he did I didn't get it. as even living through it. 'Cause
Yeah.
he never talked about himself that way.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a trait that he really values in people who have some humility and realize that it's not just them. And that the people that really bothered him were the people who would take credit for other people's work or for a group's work. That annoyed him
Yeah.
to no end.
Yeah.
So he never did it.
Yeah.
Never
He
did it.
certainly didn't. He's always a humble guy, and he always made the people around him feel special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a unique talent.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the lawyers that I knew that represented him and the lawyers that were opposing him, everybody thought the world of Jim Dwyer. So,
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about it earlier, but he had this sense of fairness, and that's when you're speaking about like negotiating, and when when the other side feels like you're not trying to stick it to them, but you're trying to be fair.
yeah.
Things can happen, and that fairness was such a core to his personality.
Yeah.
You know,
That was a key that he always, and we shared that feeling, is that you always have to look at how does the other side win.
right.
Because if you're going to propose a win-lose situation, you might actually make it happen.
Yeah.
But if you screw the other guy, it's going to come back and haunt
Yeah.
you. And he recognized that
did.
as I did.
Yeah.
Just so important to do that. And it kind of goes back to his philosophy on taking care of the customer. What does the customer really want, and how do I provide that? And when you take a look at your negotiations, you kind of look at that other side as being your customer and
Yeah.
saying, okay, what do they need? What do they need to get out of this? And
Yeah.
if you can make that happen and you get what you need, you gotta compromise that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a unionist at doing that.
Certainly.
Yeah, we still to this day, when we get into negotiations, I try to get around the attorneys. I wonder where I got that, right? Even though he was an attorney, by the way.
Yeah.
But there's always the question, we get our red lines going back with the attorneys back and forth, and then we always go and I always say, ask them what they're protecting against.
Yeah.
What are they trying to accomplish? Tell me that, and maybe we can, you can always find a way. Just be honest. What are you trying to protect? What are you worried about?
Yeah.
It's,
Boy, and that just sounds so much like Jim. Hearing us say that.
that's
Of course.
where we got it. I mean,
Yeah.
when you see it, it's the only way.
Yeah.
We're all trying to win. He's trying to, the person on the other side is trying to win for their company. You're trying to win for your company. You got to find middle ground.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I know Denny. Hopefully Denny will be able to be on this video. And if you are Denny, pleasure. Sorry we didn't get to see you. He'll, I'm sure, talk about them at the FCC and the wars that they went through and the beers that they shared. So he'll tell that.
And they were competitors. I mean,
They were.
Denny and Jim, I don't think were ever partners in anything. And Denny, I mean, there could not be someone who thought more of Jim than Denny.
Well, it was amazing.
Well, I mean, everybody did, but Denny was really a fan.
Yeah.
You say that. So Denny was representing the B-side wire lines, and my dad was representing when they were fighting the FCC.
Yeah, and Denny was with Ameritech, and was he the CEO
He was
of
the CEO
Ameritech
of
at that time?
Ameritech.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't get to work for him, which was unfortunate. He had left by the time I got there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they were on, the FCC, and they were fighting, they were trying to keep their monopoly, and Dad was fighting to get this opened up to competition. And Denny says that they would be going to war and at it. And Denny's a tough man. He's an amazing tough guy.
Yeah.
Right? So
He played minor league baseball at one point, I think. But anyway.
all right. So he says, so then we get through this and we get through this battle, and then Jim walks to us and say, "Hey, Daddy, you want to go grab a beer?" And they became greatest friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they were fighting like cats
Yeah.
and dogs, and Denny gave the eulogy at my father's
Yes.
funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you go through life.
Yep.
Whether you're friends or foes, make everyone your friend, really.
Absolutely.
It was pretty cool. So yeah, it's fun stuff, and
Yeah.
we miss him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a
But
gentle,
he
loving-
launched so many things and affected so many lives.
Right.
Are other I know a lot of your family folks are involved in Interop. Are there other kids,
businesses.
grandkids that have got that entrepreneurial spark?
Yeah, it kind of runs through the family. We've got people involved in real estate. We've got people involved in construction. So when you, and I think it's an unfair advantage that someone like we got was
Yeah.
to see it.
Yeah.
We didn't take it for granted. We just saw, this is possible.
Yeah.
And so once you see it, you realize, I can do that too.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And
And take the risk.
there'll be a lot of bleeding.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
and Pat, you can there's so much bleeding in being an entrepreneur, and there's so
Yeah.
many days you can't sleep at night, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about it, you know, there have been periods in my career where I look out the window and I see all the employees driving in, you know, 80 cars coming in and out, and I'm like, I'm responsible for their lives
Yeah.
and their families, and I can't even imagine how Dad did it and you did it. I mean, back in the days of 20-some% interest they were getting.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
How'd you guys make it work? But you did. So.
Well, and I know that Jim did have himself other businesses. I mean, car dealership here and a real estate here. And he told me once, and I thought this was like so brilliant, that he said it doesn't matter what the deal is, it matters who's in the deal with you. And that was his, you know, talking about people that he wanted to work with and people that he trusted. And if he was in a deal with you, everybody was all in.
Yeah.
And didn't matter what it was. It was that integrity and honesty and openness.
That's one of the things that I sad about, because that, you know, and wireless has changed so much, honestly. And,
yeah.
you know, I always talk to you about it. I won't get into all my craziness, but the handshake.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Pat, you too. Pat and Dad did it. They did business on a handshake. If I gave you my word, it was my word. And it's not so much the case anymore.
Yeah.
You'll get a handshake from someone saying it's a deal, and then, you know, never follow through. So that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
That's the maturation of an industry too, though. I mean, it eventually gets to the point where, but it's sad that it's lost. Yeah.
yeah. Well, the industry certainly has changed, and you all are all still in it.
Yes.
And
What's so crazy about that?
We're that old? That's what she's saying.
So, you know, that's the future belongs to you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're trying really hard. We've got some really neat stuff. You know, the world changes when players like Apple and Google are coming into your space. And I know it's hard, really hard on the carriers. It's really hard on technologists. But we're finding our way and doing some really cool stuff. So we just got to keep reinventing every day.
Yeah.
And you can never sleep because you got to keep moving.
Are any of the third generation Dwyers in the telecom space, the IT space? I don't even know what we call it anymore.
Not really.
Yeah.
I let them. I have them working for other people, so they can kind of get punched and beat up and learn it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, eventually, maybe we'll do something together. Kind of thing.
Right.
My son is crazy entrepreneur. I've never seen someone with a more fertile brain. I have to calm him down all the time. He's like, you know, just it's crazy. He was a baseball player, but he's so driven. I've never seen anything like it. He calls me every day, question.
Oh, right. Well, you'll look forward to that day when you call him and say, let's have dinner.
So I've been blessed to have a beautiful daughter and an amazing son, and so life's been good to us.
Yeah.
And they remember Grandpa D.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you all have all stayed so close, because sometimes in families that's not a dynamic doesn't really work out.
Yeah, you know, let's talk about that real quick, because it's a testament to Dad.
Yeah.
I have six in my group. I have 5 brothers and sisters that are full. I have 5 that are half and 1 that's a step, and we're all one family.
Yeah.
And somehow Dad was able to just through love and whatever it was, we are one family.
Yeah.
And we love each other, and we care about each other, and we protect each other, and we die for each other. So it's pretty miraculous, honestly.
Well, I'm sorry.
I went to work for Dad when I was fairly young, kind of just out of college, and I thought I'd be here. I thought I'd be in Florida for a couple of years, and now I've been there even longer than John. But when I first went to work for him, I don't think he said one word at the office for the first year I worked there to me. I worked for somebody else. That's who I reported to, and he didn't say anything to me. And I was like, am I doing something wrong? But he didn't want to step into the middle of that relationship.
Yeah.
And you know, when I think about, you know, all these siblings, I mean, I work for John. John's the head of our company, and it's never been a problem, because I learned a long time ago, there's one boss, and there's a structure, and either you want to fit into that or you buck that. And I treat it with respect. I think John would say the same. John's also a pretty good boss, so
Oh.
I don't I don't have any issues there.
And the company's name is Interop Technology.
But you know, those things were learned because Dad didn't treat us like we were these golden children that were supposed to step in and you know, be respected. We had to earn that, and we had to go work hard and learn and prove ourselves. And that's you know, that's what makes it easy working together now, because we none of us are mailing it in. We all know why we're there, and we're working towards a common goal. And you know, we respect each other, but also respect there's a structure, and that's totally from my dad.
You guys should talk about your dad's relationship with engineers. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, he was crazy. Like I said, he was an attorney.
Yeah.
And how he got there is crazy because he didn't finish high school. Got kicked out of he was crazy. I told you he was a punk from, you know, whatever.
Kicked out of 5 high schools.
5 or 6 high schools. But he got a brother or something, a Jesuit or something, to get him into college. And he went off to college. He got his undergrad. He got his law degree. So he came out as an attorney. So he's an attorney. He started doing law work and said, I hate this. And then he was an entrepreneur. That's just how it happened. But he loved engineers. I think because, like you said, to create an amazing product, to be great for your customers, you've got to have amazing technology. Love technologists. Like Jim would say, he would show up in the office one day with a guy or a girl and say, just hire her. Do something with them. Like, what?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
He used to lovingly say, I collect nerds. He meant it lovingly.
Yeah.
He would find a smart person. He would just hire him. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
And then he'd create an he called it NSD. You say, what is NSD? Neat shit department. I don't know if you
All right. Yeah.
But anyway, he loved engineers, and he learned so much. He really listened and learned. And you were there. His favorite award he ever got, and obviously he got a bunch. It was the coveted Sarnoff citation.
Oh, that's Sarnoff. Yes, that was it. Yeah,
from the Radio Club of America.
Yeah.
We'd never seen him so excited, and we were all there for it. And we broke the elevator. Remember that it was starting to fall. We jumped out. It's a big family.
Oh yeah.
But why, Dad? Why is this? I've never seen you react like that. And it was because it was engineers.
Right.
Awarding him and recognizing him, because he said engineers look at business people like that they recognized him, and it just touched his heart.
You know, I thought he was an engineer for the longest time, and it was fascinating to go around like the trade shows with Jim, and going up to a company, and he just knew, like, okay, this is how whatever they're doing works or isn't going to work. And he would approach some of the, you know, floor people and sort of say, tell me about this. And then he would start, you know, asking the questions when they're like, you know, and then he would know. He was like, okay, this company's got a chance. This company's going to be gone in a year. Yeah. He just had that, you know.
The importance of his understanding engineers is critical, in my mind, to his success. Because he needed to know enough. He didn't have to know all of it. He needed to know enough so he could pick winners and losers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to me, is one of the things that really helped him along as he went. And one of the reasons we had such a great interest, because he knew he had to know this stuff.
Yeah.
And so he loved engineers because they were so important to his success.
And Pat, you're honestly the same. You're the same guy.
Well, I recognize it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fortunately, I had a brother who knew more about engineering than I did, and that helped out a lot.
Yeah.
It's always good to have people to lean on.
Right.
Absolutely.
All my people are smarter than me, and I love it.
And there's so much about your dad, but, you know, are there things that just, you know, you stand out? And
there's an interesting thing that happened once, and I just it tells me a lot about him. So like I said, I was in Chicago. He was down in Florida, and he came in one time to see the family that was up there, and we went to the movie Amadeus.
Huh?
I don't know that I ever went to a movie with my dad. We went to the movie Amadeus, and we're watching the movie, and I look over and my dad is crying. And I'd never seen my dad cry.
Yeah.
And after the movie, we was talking to him and just trying to get out what was going on. He said, see, they're always trying to keep the small man down. And they just kept a foot on him, and they always try to keep, and he was talking about himself
Yeah.
And I can see that even in our little world, you know. So a lot of time these big companies, middle management just knocks you away. You may be the best thing since sliced bread, but if you're not IBM, they're not hiring you.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate to the wireless industry. And that's one of the changes to the industry that I hate.
Yeah.
The best man does not what he
Yeah.
The safest man does.
saves man.
Yeah.
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 But he always saw himself an underdog, even when he was winning, which was cute. And people always ask, what was your favorite thing about him?
Yeah.
And I always say his giggle.
Yeah.
His giggle.
He was the cutest. I don't know how to explain it. Like, everyone's like, your dad's an amazing businessman. He's an amazing this. He's amazing. I said, he's so silly.
Oh, he was.
My favorite part. The boys would get together. We'd be doing something stupid, and he would be chuckling. And hearing him so joyous and joyful, it was just so. That was my favorite thing about him.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, I agree. He was, true Irish. Loved the whole, the storytelling. Oh my gosh, was he a storyteller, huh?
Fantastic.
Just unbelievable storyteller. But that silliness, he would look. We all have a limited time on this planet. He wasn't going to waste it being upset. When he sold the final company, he said to us, I don't know how long it was later, like a month later, I had no idea how much stress I was under. It's been his whole life. It's been his whole life since he was a kid and all the way through his career. And then when he finally sold and it was his last wireless company, all of a sudden all of that lifted and he was just a guy. But through all of that, he never let it sap the joy from his life.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some pretty difficult times in a career as long and as through the changes that he went through. But man, he just loved to have fun. He just loved to have fun.
And you said something else that just reminded me. I was always amazed by his ability in the most stressful situations. He had levity.
He did.
I think it was because he always knew I'll find a way out
Yeah.
of this. And that's not. I have some of that, but not as much as he does. I deal with stress differently, but I was always amazed by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, both of you, and Denny have been amazing friends to Dad. And I will say this: he knows a gazillion people, but you know him well enough to know he's very a little guarded in terms of who he really lets in, because he doesn't know who he can trust. That whole thing, and he was that way. And you both were, and Denny were amazing. Dear friends to him and to us, and I praise the Lord that you're still in my life. So thank you.
Well, it's so easy to fall in love with the entire Dwyer family. So, as I think so many of us have, but Jim was, 1 in a million.
He was.
Truly, 1 in 17 million, a million. There was nobody like Jim.
Yeah. Pretty.
That's absolutely true. I still remember, it was I knew I had to come down to see your dad. Probably not going to get this out.
I know.
So to speak.
I came to see Jim, toward the end, and he still had that twinkle in his eye and that joy of, hey, I had a good run. I have a great family. I have wonderful friends. If I die tomorrow, I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
And what a great legacy for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's what he was. He was all about. I know when we talked, I said, Jim, tell me, what are you going through? Yeah, because we both knew he was dying, and he said, Pat, I'm not really here. I'm in twilight. He said, I feel like I'm in a twilight area, and he was enjoying it. And here he is, I don't know how many days later he passed away, but it wasn't much. And yet he was still Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And spirit was still there.
Yeah. Well, obviously losing your dad, who, not only the father relationship, but the boss relationship, and having gone through working for him for all these years, all of that was difficult. But the one thing that made it easier is knowing that, my gosh, he was content at the end, because he had lived his life how he meant to live his life. He left a legacy of the real legacy he cared about was the legacy of his family.
Exactly.
Yes.
He left a
Yeah.
bigger legacy, which is the reason why we're here, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was a life well lived, and I took a lot of comfort in that when he passed away. No one wants anyone to leave, but when you leave,
What an
no regrets, and
Yeah.
leaving a lot of happiness and a lot of great memories and a great industry also behind.
And a
A lot
great
to be
family.
proud of. Yeah.
I still drive myself, my
Yeah.
career to make him proud.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's still drives me today. I hope he's proud of me and us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dope.
Yeah. Well, he's left a legacy, and there is no one like Jim Dwyer.
Nobody liked Jim.
Amazing. So, yeah, somebody hopefully will eventually write a book about him
Yeah.
and tell some of the stories that we dare not tell today.
Well, it's been an honor being his kid.
Yeah. For
Well, he was so proud of you guys.
Yeah.
So proud of you guys, for all 12 of you. But yeah.